Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for joining the 17th session of the Sustainability Insight. Firstly, I would like to introduce our organizing team from UNESCO Jakarta. My name is Sachi Suzuki, JFIT coordinator, and here we have Bidyani Ahmad, Gani Mulia, and Chiptaya Matsanda, and Martin Lajo Bunsu. The title of today's session is Pathways for Realizing Water Security Across Borders. We proudly present Professor Shahbaz Khan, the Director of UNESCO Regional Science Bureau for Asia and Pacific, as a moderator. And we have two distinguished speakers, Mr. Shinsuke Ota, Vice President Honorary, International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage, and Dr. Ravi Narayanan, Chair of Asia Pacific Water Forum Governing Council. We are ready to take your questions through the Q&A box and the Facebook page. Also, please check the chat box and find the supportive materials shared by Mr. Ota for your reference. And if you wish to receive the certificate, please fill the attendance list, which we will share during the webinar. Professor Shahbaz, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Dr. Sachi. We are so honored to have two very distinguished water colleagues, Mr. Shinsuke Ota, whom I know for more than 10 years. And he has been, I would say, the father of integrated water resources management guidelines, which we will be discussing today. And also Dr. Ravi Narayanan, a very important figure in water resources management in the areas of groundwater, in the areas of governance, and also how do we bring cooperation at the level of whole of Asia Pacific through Asia Pacific Water Forum. So we are going to learn some very important concepts from both learned colleagues. Let me start first with Mr. Ota. He's also doing a great job with ICID, as you can see from his CV as well. So we will explore one concept at a time. Dear Mr. Ota, can you please give your idea about IWRM? What does it mean for you and how it can help the world?
Okay, thank you for giving opportunity. Let me referring to a brief history of IWRM. The term IWRM first appeared in 1972 at UN conference on the human environment held in Stockholm, Sweden. It was almost half a century ago. In 1992, principles for IWRM were formulated at International Conference on Water and Environment in Dublin, Ireland. They are known as Dublin Principles. In the year 2000, Global Water Partnership elaborated first definition of IWRM, which reads, IWRM is a process which promotes the coordinated development and management of water, land, and related resources in order to maximize the resultant economic and social welfare in an equitable manner without compromising the sustainability of vital ecosystems. I like the definition by GDP since it adequately illustrates essence of IWRM, including its character, cover area, objectives, and others. Anybody familiar with IWRM, like you, will regard the definition as reasonable and easy to understand. However, I thought this definition might be too complicated for the people unfamiliar with IWRM. So I tried to work out a simple message interpreting this definition for them. It is happiness of the people in the basin. I named this Gross Basin Happiness, or GBH, after Gross National Happiness. Using this index, you will not yield any loser in the basin. Gross national happiness was advocated by the former king of Bhutan, as you may know. And against GNP, and has been used to measure his country's national power in terms of happiness.
Thank you very much. That makes it much simpler, dear Mr. Ota. So if we implement IWRM, Integrated Water Resources Management, the grass basin happiness will increase. So I like your interpretation to the next level, and I'm sure the water managers like it as well. I will come back to you with my follow-up question. So let me first also go now to Dr. Ravi Narayanan. Dear Ravi, there is another very important term which is used by water professionals as well as by the UN system, WASH. What is WASH and how it links with IWRM?
Thank you, Shahbaz. Well, WASH is water sanitation and hygiene. And it is unfortunately, I use the word unfortunately, often been boxed in as a separate sector. Actually, it's not. Professor Ota-san has talked about gross basin
happiness.
Drinking water and sanitation and hygiene are also part of happiness. They are not separate from happiness. So I think the first thing to do is to recognize that you cannot have safe water, sanitation and hygiene without water. So you have to protect and conserve the resource, which is all part of IWRM. So they are inextricably linked, and this realization, in fact, has to spread wider, both internationally and nationally, so that we are not atomized and segregated by subsector, but we look at it in a holistic manner.
Okay, that's very important also. So WASH is the element which is relating to the water and sanitation and hygiene, and it's part of the bigger IWRM
Yes, absolutely.
understanding. And if we have better WASH, of course, our happiness will increase, our satisfaction with life will increase. So both of you now agree that maybe we are going to improve the grass basin happiness if we are able to provide water security and sanitation security, if I can say, but we need to bring all those stakeholders together. So let me continue, dear Ravi, now to Professor Ota. Professor Ota, what was your motivation? We started working together in 2009. I was based in UNESCO headquarters in Paris, and you are working with a very important organization, Japan Water Agency, JWA. And I welcome all those colleagues who have joined us. What was your motivation to work on IWRM guidelines? Can you please give us some ideas from there?
Okay. Preparation of IRM guidelines went into action on the initiative by Japan. In 2008, Department of Water Resources in the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transportation and Tourism decided to contribute the trust fund to UNESCO to formulate IWRM guidelines. The global situation of increasing recognition about the importance of IWRM pushed the ministry's decision. Promotion of IWRM was referred to as an important tool to tackle with water-related challenges in various documents, such as Johannesburg Plan of Implementation, adopted in the World Summit on Sustainable Development held in Johannesburg, South Africa in 2002, a water resources sector strategy issued by World Bank in 2004, and the 8th Hokkaido Toyako Summit Leaders Declaration in Japan in 2008. And UNESCO established the steering committee for preparing the guidelines, and I became a member as the executive vice president of Japan Water Agency. Japan Water Agency is in charge of irrigation, municipal, and industrial water supply, as well as flood control by dams in 7 important river basins in Japan, and has been practicing IRRM for about half a century. When I was appointed as a co-chair of the committee, I committed myself to create unique ones, taking views of users into consideration as much as possible. Yeah, this
That's very important background. And also in the process, Professor Ota, there was some very interesting input which came from Japan, especially the improvement of the rivers flowing through Tokyo. So there was a lot of rich Japanese experience in improving, if we can say, gross basin happiness through a process.
True.
Can you please give a little bit more background on the movement towards bringing all stakeholders in the river basin in Japan? How did it come about?
By the time the steering committees set about the preparation of the guidelines, the principles and concepts of IRRM had been widely recognized, but the implementation of IRRM was not satisfactorily progressing in many basins. The committee members realized that there was a need for a mechanism to translate the IRRM principles and process into practical applications. To get started with IRRM, you needed to identify the full spectrum of stakeholders involved in river basin, namely farmers and city dwellers and power generation companies or such and such, and even environmentalist. Yeah, anyhow. So it is important to have a good understanding of how other stakeholders related to water and how they are related to you through water. So we dug out how do they feel and how do they think from our experiences in many Japanese river basins. So naturally, the river basin approach was considered appropriate for the guidelines. So we choose that approach. So this approach seeks to focus on implementing IRRM principles on the basis of better coordination among operating and water management entities within the river basin, with a focus on allocating and delivering reliable water-dependent services in an equitable manner. We had very many experiences about the dispute among the water users. But sitting together, we solved the problem. So we extract the core value from the process and put it into the guidelines. And also, we also noticed that existing papers on IRRM lacked views of water using sectors. In each river basin, individual water using sectors were acting in their own interest with very little interaction with one another. For my special field, irrigation is also the same. So we propose to think of IRRM as a user-friendly and cooperative approach that is an alternative to the previous activities. The guidelines invite each sector to fruitful participation and cooperation in IRRM with a practical roadmap so as to contribute to achieving both private and public benefits in a sustainable manner.
That's very important background. So there was a body of knowledge which was already in Japan for solving some of the conflicts. And in the process, many things were learned. But I think the most important, reference here is Professor Ota, that we have this knowledge that we need to bring it to the river basin level. And, and IWRM will work best on the river basin level. Let me turn now to Ravi to also get some ideas from his experience in India. And Ravi, also you are an expert in the area of groundwater, which is a very important area for all of us. Can you give some insights to us about water governance and what we have learned in India, which you can share with our colleagues who have joined us today?
Thank you very much. Well, a lot of the dependence on drinking water and sanitation depends on water that is extracted from the ground, through bore wells and so on, groundwater. But because it is invisible, it is out of our minds. We don't think about it. We just use it. But that is a mistake for several reasons. One is groundwater is inextricably linked to river flows. So the base flows of rivers are affected by the use or misuse of groundwater. So if I can use an analogy, IWRM is like using a telescope. You're getting a big scan. WASH is a bit like using a microscope. You know, you go into the separate, but you have to use both telescope and microscope. Otherwise, you're not going to solve the problem. Now, groundwater has to be therefore understood. First of all, it's a question of imagination. People have to understand that the bulk of today's freshwater resources in the world is actually not surface water, but subsurface water, number one. Number two, we can do something about it by one, finding out where the aquifers are, and two, then on that basis, try and devise a responsible governance model that ensures the protection of that underground water and equitable use by all the sectors. So that could be industry, irrigation, agriculture, and drinking water. So it's a harmonization. So Professor Ota-san is absolutely right. We've got to harmonize these uses. But to harmonize the uses, we have to understand the source of the resource, which is water, how it is used and how it is depleted, and what the threats might be to it. For that, you need the science of hydrology. And you, Shahbaz, as an eminent hydrologist, know this better than anybody else. Hydrology is at the heart of security.
Yeah. So, Ravi, if you can go one step further, thank you for giving us the idea. We need to look into both surface and groundwater. Yes. We need to look into the whole water cycle. With your key role as the chair of the Governing Council of Asia Pacific Water Forum, you also have insight into the work of many eminent organizations which are contributing, including the UN system. What is our understanding in the Asia Pacific region on this understanding of the water cycle and especially groundwater? Because most people, because they can't see it, they really do not know as much. What is our current understanding of the groundwater in the region? And you may draw also your experience from India as well.
So you're right. People, because it is out of sight, it's out of mind sometimes. People don't realize the importance of groundwater. And UNESCO has a unique role because the UNESCO program on groundwater is a pioneer in this respect. So we need to understand, we need to be able to map aquifers at various levels, because there are micro aquifers and like the Ogallala aquifer is a huge one, but there are very small ones on which tiny villages depend for water security, both for irrigation, drinking water, and human needs, all kinds of human needs. So the first task for us is to understand what lies below the surface, just as we know what lies above the surface. That's one very important thing. The Asia Pacific Water Forum attempts to bring together all these experiences of different players, from the UN system, from government, from the civil society, et cetera, to share in their knowledge and experience. And I'll come to that a little later, how we can do the sharing, because that is an important part. Not everything can be shared because some of it is contextual. but we need to understand the principles on which responsible water use is based. And we can't do that unless we factor in groundwater.
That's very interesting. So basically, in terms of today's topic, we have these pathways for realizing water security. So pathways are also hydrological between surface and groundwater and across borders, which may also include cooperation among countries. And Mr. Ota has given us a very interesting insight right from the beginning. We need to understand our stakeholders and bring them together. And as we bring them together, we help go through a process which can help cross many of the borders within a society. So let me now ask Professor Ota, you introduced some really interesting concepts which have been stuck in my mind for more than 10 years. One of them is the spiral approach.
Yeah.
Not this circle we said, the spiral. And the other one is keys for success. Can you please give us an idea what really spiral means in increasing the gross basin happiness?
Yeah, okay. Yes, spiral model. For IWRM process, we introduced a notion of spiral because IWRM is a never-ending story or an open-ended process that evolves in a spiral manner over time as one moves toward more coordinated water resources management. We knew PCDA cycle or plan, do, check, and act cycle for better quality management, which had been widely used in various management activities. We considered this cycle should be moving up toward higher level of the river basin. Result, a spiral image, not starting with plan, was drawn by adding time scale into this cycle so that the stakeholders can better recognize the situations. And talking about the starting point of IRRM, there is no strict rule. A stakeholder feels uneasy about water situation in his, her river basin. The feeling can be a recognition. And the situation can be at the starting point of the spiral. Okay, now I'll explain about key for success. The feature about key for success. The steering committee members thought the format, how to convey your ideas, was as crucial as the contents. In doing so, we should be careful about the people's tendency that they are apt to make an easy choice of a solution. Their concern is what to do. The steering committee members all recognized there was no fit-in-all guidelines. In preparing the guidelines, we placed emphasis on how to think instead of what to do. Taking good cases, for example, people tend to copy them for their problems. When you simply apply a case to your problem, it may often trigger another problem. It is because any case has unique background and stakeholders. Therefore, various cases should be well examined and presented after correct interpretation. The important thing is to trace how the stakeholders thought and to dig out core values in each case. We named it Key for Success. Thank you.
If we can explore this key for success a little bit more, as I was part of the steering committee and we discussed with our colleagues who came from many different river basins, like for example, the Murray-Darling in Australia, the key word for success for moving to the next level of water policy was there was a big drought. So the key for success was that there was a need, unless people act and work together, they could not have managed the drought. And I remember the example of Tokyo Olympics when there was a major challenge with the pollution of the river going through Tokyo.
Yeah.
Can you just give us a little bit more idea about 3-4 areas which people can relate themselves? And key for success means people came together, they coordinated, they felt the need for understanding and coordinating. So if you can give 1 or 2 examples.
Okay, for example, we faced a serious water shortage before the former Olympic Games held in Tokyo. So the Tokyo city was keen to get enough water for the Olympic Games. But the farmers were very reluctant to, share the water with Tokyo City. So the solution is like this: they get together and to convey water from another river to Ara River, I remember, and the Tokyo can take that water to the city dwellers. So for that, the farmers were happy to get, more safer or water. Because they faced water shortages also in farmland. So the irrigation sector and Tokyo or city municipal get together and they agreed for the better level of the water situation. Another thing is that in Tokyo we have a Sumida River. It was very contaminated and very polluted, and to draw water to the river for to make it cleaner. So that was another need for the Tokyo city. So in doing so, we negotiated with. So the problem, the key for success is they were all very anxious about the success of Olympic Games. So unless, they all wanted to not to be a bad side, so you want to be thanked by other sectors and other people, so they choose the best solution from that period. But after that, we moved to another. Population growth of Tokyo was still, ongoing. So the next step is, farmland near Tokyo. The acreage was shrinking. So they passed the water to the Tokyo city. So this is another level. And now we are facing the, problem of risk of earthquake. So for that, we have to improve facilities. So we already done that for the third, step of the spiral. So this is our experience.
Thank you very much. So the key for success, first of all, the national pride and the Tokyo Olympics, the need for water. Then you have also, Professor Ota, given us the idea, the next level with also solving the issues of pollution, then the issues of earthquakes and the infrastructure. So every stakeholder gets something, and it's not that the solution is only suitable for one part of society. So you bring them together so that there is a negotiated approach from planning to implementation and monitoring evaluation. So everyone feels part of the solution. So it's not top down or bottom up only. It is to bring the aspects in a spiral, which basically means the next level should be better than where they were before. So thank you very much.
And not
dear
best, but better.
Better level.
Everybody better.
Yeah,
So
everybody is
that's the
better off.
concept. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone is better off than where they
Yeah.
were before. And
That's true.
nobody is marginalized. No stakeholder is marginalized. Very important concept.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what we need. So there is cooperation which is needed. And a spiral approach helps us take it to the next level of grass basin happiness or better integrated river basin management.
Yeah, yeah.
And dear colleagues, if you would like to get a copy of the guidelines, Dr. Sachi will put a reference. All these guidelines are available online and we will be happy to provide you. Let me continue now with Ravi. Cooperation also is needed, dear Ravi, as you were mentioning before, in understanding the water cycle, in sharing experiences of governance, in sharing integrated water resources management. How does this process work at the level of the region? How can we bring people together so they can talk to each other more, they can exchange ideas, they can start cooperating for surface water, for groundwater, from the basic knowledge to cooperation on governance? Would you like to share some insights from your experience?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Shahbaz. You're absolutely right. The spiral principle explains the concept behind it, but to translate that concept into reality, we have to be very cautious. Like Ota-san was saying, you can't just copy. So we can say, oh, in Tokyo, this happened, so we can use it in Ulaanbaatar. No, maybe not. So what we have to understand is how to tell a story. The story is not just a story. The story has principles behind it. What are the institutional mechanisms? What is the accessibility to science? What is the capacity institutionally and individually? Then you can say that they are either constraints or they are impelling factors. So by mapping out both the impelling and impeding factors, we are able to say this works in certain circumstances, not in certain circumstances. So across the Asia Pacific, when we share our knowledge, we have to be careful about the analysis. Also, we have to be very careful about the cost of the exercise, because you can say, I want to buy a Rolls Royce, but you can only have enough money for a motorcycle. There's no point in trying to buy a Rolls Royce, you know. So the first responsibility for people sharing knowledge is to put it in the context. And the context has to take in factor social, economic, cultural, all sorts of other factors, so that people understand the applicability to different situations. That's number one. Number two is, even within one country, there can be huge variations, because people who are better off, people who are better educated, and those who are not. Just to give you an example, you asked me for examples from India. There is a movement now to understand aquifers at the local level. Now you can map aquifers using remote sensing technology and also fun, but the granularity of that will be limited. So if you want to be really granular, there is no escaping from the fact that local people have to be involved. Now for local people to be involved, they have to understand the science. So the science has to be doctored and tailored in such a way that they can make use of it. So it is science for the people. So it's not just the PhDs that you're relying on, but you're barefoot hydrologists. So that is one way of approaching the situation from a very localized perspective. The second is, so having taken advantage of this, how to use the knowledge that is generated. What is the way in which the knowledge is shared? And that is as much art as it is science. You can't just have spreadsheets everywhere, you know. It's a mixture of spreadsheets, it's a mixture of audiovisual, it's a mixture of GIS. All sorts of techniques have to be used so that people can understand and relate it to their specific solution. So similarly, these principles can be applied across countries as well. But above all, it is the ability and the willingness to share that is the most important. Are you willing to share what you've got so that you can benefit everybody? That's a value system. And that is what the UN is trying to promote. And hopefully UNESCO has got a central part in that.
That's very important and interesting insight, dear Ravi. And I like your analogy of the barefoot hydrologist who should be working with the community. Every one of us, whether we have a PhD or whether we have no PhD, water is everyone's business. And
Absolutely.
communities need to be empowered by knowing what really is below the ground and what is their share from the water above and how they can jointly work together. So that's very important. If I can take this discussion to one next level, there are many other borders. Of course, there are hydrological borders, there are community borders which we have to cross, disciplinary borders we have to cross. One of the areas which is very hard is the political borders. And that's where Asia Pacific Water Forum, under your leadership with many institutions, is playing an important role to bring colleagues from Australia, from Myanmar, from Japan, from India, Pakistan, from many parts of the world to come and share their knowledge. And one of the mechanisms is this Asia Pacific Water Summit. The last one was in Myanmar. Would you like to give us a little bit more idea how such kind of cooperation can be promoted more, and how can we actually move towards crossing the political boundaries at the level of knowledge and cooperation among people?
Okay, so the Asia Pacific Water Forum was devised as a network. The network requires a leap of imagination. It does not belong to anyone. It belongs to everyone. That means that you have to be confident enough and secure enough to share what you've got in the belief that what is good for me will be good for everybody else. That's very important. So it works at several levels. Either, for instance, this Asia Pacific Water Summit, we hope all the political leaders will come, agree on what is important for all of them across the region, whether it is in Central Asia, South Asia, East Asia, or anywhere else, and agree to commit themselves to promotion of sharing and cross fertilization. That's number one. At the micro, that's at the macro level. At the micro level, which is where the barefoot hydrologists are, we also need to know what is the situation on the ground. And somehow we have to bridge this gap between the macro and the micro through the meta level. So across countries, for instance, river boundaries, right? We're talking about sharing of river waters. It's more than that. What about sharing of groundwater aquifers, which feed the rivers? Now, very little has been discussed about that, but we need to bring that into the discussion. How do we map transboundary aquifers? How do we measure the impact of and flows of water from these aquifers on river flows, etc.? And how do we come to a win-win situation? These are very, very difficult and sometimes delicate matters because the politics trumps everything else. But we have to make sure that the people understand that winning for me is as good as winning for you, and winning for you should be as good as winning for me. It's almost like a philosophical concept. And I go back to my hero and guru, that is Rumi. He says, suspend the individual ego, then you will get somewhere.
That's very important in this COVID situation, Ravi, as well. Yeah. If we have to find solution, we have to find it together. We must suspend all those egos. We have to work together.
Absolutely.
That's really very important.
And celebrate the fact that working together is good for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the only way we can continue to advance knowledge and cooperation. And that's where the APWF is doing a great job. Would you like to quickly give us an idea about the summit?
Okay, so the summit was supposed to be this year, but unfortunately because of COVID, it's had to be postponed. And it's April 2022 to give us enough time. The summit is an occasion for all the political leaders to come together on an equal platform, non-partisan, and to say that, yes, water problems in my country has got many features which could be the same as in your country. So what are all these problems? It could be one of climate change, sudden droughts and floods. It could be one of over extraction of groundwater. It could be one of disasters. We have to share all these problems and say that in order to solve these problems, which are common in some way or the other across all the countries in the region, what are the few things that we can do and commit ourselves to publicly and unequivocally? So it could be, for instance, commit ourselves that we will provide safe water and sanitation by a certain date, which means you have to put resources into it, you have to put institutional power into it, and you have to build knowledge networks that can get you to that place. That's number one. How do we share disasters, for instance? How do we share knowledge? How do we share information? So it could be meteorological information, it could be hydrological information. What is the best way of doing that? And how do we monitor the uses that it has been put to? So there are many, many practical ways in which we can work together for the common good. Historically, the Asia Pacific has always looked to Europe and America for solutions. But there is so much that we can learn from each other. We can learn from Japan, we can learn from China, we can learn from Korea. We can learn so much from each other. Let us do that. And that is the purpose of these summits.
That's very important, and it has a strong leadership from Japan. The next summit is in Kumamoto City. We are all looking forward to that. And it was started by His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Japan. So that's the level of leadership which has continued over a period of time. So, and thank you for your leadership as the chair of the Governing Council of the Asia Pacific Water Forum, which provides inputs, and of course, many other partners who contribute to the summit. So all those who are listening, please continue to look at the website of APWF and also look for Asia Pacific Water Summit. There will be many interesting areas which will be discussed, and we will provide you the link also on our website. So we are coming towards the end of our discussion. I would like to come to Professor Ota. Where we go next in terms of IWRM, or Integrated River Basin Management, to be more precise. JWA has played a very important role, and your own leadership, you are also playing a very important role in the International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage as the Honorary Vice President. Would you give us ideas, where should we go, where should be our next steps, and what can our program, Japan Funds Interest can in science can help move forward?
Okay, UNESCO guidelines is formulated to accommodate the following three distinctive changes, because it is not just a set of case examples, but a reservoir of ideas extracted from various cases. So I'm now talking about the three distinctive changes: society change, climate change, and technology change. Society is moving toward increasing involvement of individuals. For example, public comment has become a common practice in many administrative procedures in Japan. Following this trend, IWRM should be no more carried out by professionals only. The second, influences of climate change are apparent. As Dr. Ravi pointed out, we are facing severe disasters. Today, precipitation rate often reaches to unprecedented level. Mega typhoons are not uncommon anymore. And in addition, risk of big earthquakes is increasing. And the third, recent progress of science and technology is remarkable. When the guidelines was issued, we didn't have smartphones, and prediction accuracy about flood simulation wasn't enough to apply to actual river basins. Today, you can easily organize this remote interview. For the future, paradigm change or shift in applying IWRM process is inevitable to cope with these changes, both for professionals and general people. In the new IRM process, approach by informed consent with alternatives is effective to promote involvement of individuals. For example, a coordinator asks opinions of the people living riverside about some alternatives regarding food disaster prevention measures, including bank raising and warning system with flood hazard map. In order to realize this paradigm shift, professionals are required to challenge innovative approach, breaking with a precedent, and to have translation capability of their strategy to individuals, while general people should acquire proper recognition about IRM. In addition, progress of the information society is favorable both for professionals and general people to adapt to society and climate change. Can I explain a little bit more?
Yeah, please do so.
Okay. By using the latest communication hard and softwares, any coordinator, as one of the professionals, can easily make negotiation process transparent and to ask people's opinion. Moreover, the latest technology will make it possible for professional engineers to develop accurate flood simulation model and apply the simulator in the field using advanced communication systems. This has already come true in Japan by Japan Water Agency. General people will be able to easily learn about IRM through internet. If a flood, this is very important, if a flood of technical terms is properly translated and a variety of IRM concepts is explained in an easy to manner, their improved knowledge level of IRM will help a lot for them to make correct judgment in choosing one among various alternatives shown by professionals, and to take necessary action when a natural disaster attacks their basin. So the UNESCO guidelines is helpful to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So really now with the time we are better in technology, the guidelines are there. Maybe there can be additional volumes which we can think in terms of how do we use the latest technology, the communication means, the modeling ability
Yeah.
to look into big data sets. So that's very interesting insight. Maybe UNESCO, JWA, NARBO can work together to understand how do we use technology to make decision-making
Yes.
processes more
Yeah.
inclusive. So that's very
Yeah,
interesting.
I think UNESCO and Japanese funds and trusts, and also, of course, you can support IRM initiative in two ways in the field of human resources development. I'd like to stress again that for the future, IRM paradigm shift is inevitable. IRM professionals should acquire proficiency in process applying informed consent and upskill interpretation capability besides understanding the contents of the guidelines.
Very
On the other
important.
hand, IRM literacy education should be promoted among general people so that they can acquire an ability to make decisions when required in the process of informed consent or change their lifestyle prepared for disasters and to take prompt action when it happened. So to train staff from river basin organizations in Asia, NARBO, Network of Asian River Basin Organizations, has been playing an important role. This network was established in order to help achieve IRM in river basins throughout Asia in 2004, and 94 organizations from 19 countries have become its member. As one of the secretariats, Japan Water Agency has actively organized IRM training courses and workshops in collaboration with other member countries and member organizations. But I understand NARBO's activities confined to only IRM process. Therefore, I hope UNESCO and Japan Funds in Trust can support or coordinate with NARBO in the additional field related to paradigm shift. One possible area is training professionals in new IRM process and improved ability to make their approach understood by wide range of stakeholders. The other is enhancing IRM literacy among general people, since UNESCO's principal role is to eradicate illiteracy. Yeah, I hope you will consider possibility of bringing this idea into action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ota. Really a lot of wisdom. I always learn from you so much. Let me also bring the final question to Dr. Ravi. Dr. Ravi, where is the frontier now? And especially as you mentioned, COVID has shown that we cannot solve or tackle any issue unless we work together. These are interconnected challenges from climate change, global change, challenges of water management. Where is the frontier? Where will we need to focus for those colleagues who want to develop their careers in the area of water management?
Okay, so let me just build on something that Professor Ota-san is talking about. He talked about software. Okay, in this COVID era, you know, education is now becoming online, okay? We have to understand what is the pedagogy of learning. How do we transfer knowledge? How do we advance our conceptual understanding, etc.? And so we have to look beyond the water sector to the educational sector, for instance. UNESCO is bang in the middle of it. So you have your arms towards education, you have your arms towards water. How do we bring them together? What is the pedagogy? So let me just give you one example. Here in Bangalore city, there is a small organization called Iwrm, which is trying to build learning platforms. Okay. Now, learning platforms is if you, Shahbaz or Professor Ota-san or I have done a successful project or something, we want to put it on the platform, but we have to put it in such a way that somebody else can use it. What do we put? How do we put it? You know, these are areas for us to explore. We are still in its infancy, but we have huge opportunities for learning and scaling up through a virtual route, not necessarily going and teaching a class of 20 people sitting before us. You know, how do we do it? So those are the challenges for the future. And those are the challenges that we can invest in, understanding the pedagogy of learning, trying to develop new models at which data can be uploaded and downloaded, increase capacity, and to understand that sustainable development is built on three pillars. One is science and technology. We can use software, et cetera, IT, and so on. The other one is capacity. We can increase the capacity of individual and institutions. And the third is the third is institution and governance. Governance can be done in such a way that governments are also involved. It's not that governments are somewhere else and other agencies are somewhere else. They can be part of the system. It's an exciting time, and we need to be thrilled and excited to be part. I know it's a sad time as well, but let us not be completely despondent, because it has given us pathways and reason for some sort of hope for the future.
Thank you, Ravi. That's also the positivity, which is very unique for our race. That is the only way we can innovate and deal with these pandemics. And certainly there are new ways of looking at all these challenges. So that's all the time we had today. I thank Professor Ota for his wisdom, as well as Dr. Ravi Narayanan for many, many insights. I will try to summarize very briefly. Those colleagues who have less time, they can go through the summary. In summary, there are many borders which we need to cross. The first one, very importantly, we need to bring all stakeholders together. We need to understand who are the stakeholders in a river basin. Integrated water resource management is not a new concept. Since 70s, we know it. But how do we bring this concept into implementation? And that's where the work of JWA and Professor Ota on the spiral model, bringing stakeholders together, and the grass basin happiness, that we find a better solution which is acceptable to all stakeholders and move to the next level, uh, from planning all the way to implementation and monitoring and evaluation. And in that regard, these guidelines have been very, very useful. There are practical examples how different sectors can come in, like the sector like irrigation can come in. How do we manage floods, for example? How do we look into urban water management? So very, very practical guidelines. The work was started in 2009, still needs to continue. And we need to bring also, very importantly, the new technological advances. And that's where maybe stakeholders can have those platforms where they can see data very clearly. And very importantly, Dr. Ravi Narayan has mentioned, for our ability to be able to understand the surface water as well as groundwater, but not only for scientists, not only for water professionals, the engineers or the people who are dealing with the quantifying the flows of water, we need to bring this knowledge right to the level of the communities. And there is this interesting analogy of barefoot hydrologists, whether these are students or these are common people in a village or community, they must be able to understand what is the quantification of water and how surface and groundwater work in that area. How can we share it? How can we protect? How can we care? Wash, very important concept also, which improves our water and sanitation, very important during this time of COVID. But wash cannot work unless we have proper understanding of the water cycle. Then very importantly, we need to work across political boundaries as well. We need to bring knowledge together, and that's where Asia Pacific Water Forum and the Asia Pacific Water Summit are very important ways for the political players as well as experts to come together and to share their knowledge and share ideas. Uh, we have learned from Professor Ota the excellent work of Japan Water Agency and the work which the network of river basin organizations is doing. We need to continue to build capacity. And in this process, we need to now use the new platforms. We need to use technologies. And how can we use online platforms for continuing our education? That's where Japan Funds and Trust, the UNESCO office in Jakarta, colleagues who are working within the APWF coordination mechanism, we will be drawing on all of them so that we can bring the educational part along with the technical part. And of course, many important organizations such as JWA who have been providing excellent knowledge and linking also with the ICID, where Mr. Ota, Professor Ota is now the honorary vice president, and for Ravi as in his role as the chair of the governing council. There is a lot more we need to do. Everyone has to play a role. And in the process, we need to develop our own understanding, and we need to give such understanding to our colleagues, where we live, what we do. And also, one step at a time, we need to make sure this understanding goes at all levels. Only then we can cross technological borders, the borders between society, the economic borders, the borders which are political borders. And this has to continue. We look forward to continuing to work with you. We will share all the links, and all those questions which have been asked, we will request our experts to answer as usual. With that, I thank Professor Ota and Dr. Ravi Narayan. Thank you for both of you for being very generous in sharing your ideas. As always, I feel I've learned a lot from both of you, and I'm sure
Thank you
our
very much.
audience will also agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you too.
Over to Dr. Sachi.
Thank you very much, Professor Shahbaz and Mr. Ota and Dr. Ravi, as well as all participants. Next JFIT session will be held on Monday, 28th September, so please stay tuned. Please don't forget to fill the attendance list, which is shared through the chat box and also the Facebook page if you wish to receive the certificate. We keep this form open 1 hour from now. For further information, please visit our Sustainability Insight Facebook page, Instagram, and we wish you a good day and stay safe, and see you all soon on next Monday. Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear Sachi. See you, Ravi. See you, Professor Ota.
See you.
Bye-bye.